For our first example here, we're going to be looking at a poll that was done in 2017 by Gallup Polling Organization, and it asked a really important question. And one of the answers people could give to that question is that they feel religion can answer all or most of today's problems. We'll look at the other possible answers and why, phrasing in a question is super important after this. But for now, let's go ahead and stick with the results we got here. Now, we need to make sure we understand why we're doing a confidence interval, and in this problem that should be fairly obvious. I know I'm doing a confidence interval because right here it says it wants me to do a confidence interval. The other thing I need to be able to make sure I know is that I'm using proportions. I can tell I'm using proportions because of this out of, and also because it gives me a percentage. So I'm doing a confidence interval for proportions. Now that I know what I'm doing, I can go ahead and set up my steps. Although we'll do a lot of different types of confidence interval, every confidence interval we set up will have 3 steps. The first step is always to go ahead and list. This is where I put all of my information. The second step we'll do whenever we do a confidence interval is to do any of the calculations we need. After we've done our calculations and list, the third step will be to go ahead and put together our interval. By keeping these 3 same steps, regardless of the confidence interval we're doing, we'll go ahead and we'll organize our work really well, and we'll also be able to relate different types of confidence intervals to each other, seeing connections. So first step is to list. The things I need to list for a single proportion confidence interval in the beginning is p hat. Remember, p hat is the proportion from my sample. In this case, out of 1,001 adults, 55% answered that result. So I'm going to go ahead and put 0.55. Next thing I need to do is list the sample size. In this case, my sample size is 1,001 people. The final thing I need to list here is my z-score. I'm using z-scores because I'm dealing with proportions. Now I've got my z. I know I want a 95% confidence interval, and in order to get the middle 95%, I go out 1.96 standard deviation. So z is equal to 1.96. After I've done that, the next step is to go ahead and do my calculations. The only thing I need to do is calculate my estimate of standard deviation. My estimate for standard deviation is SE, or my standard error. To calculate SE, I know I take square root, p hat, 1 minus p hat, all over n. So filling this in then, I will have 0.55, 1 minus 0.55, all over 1,001. If you're plugging this into a calculator, I strongly suggest that you simplify that top, make it 0.55 times 0.45, and then divide it by 1,001, finally square rooting it. When you do this, we'll go ahead and we'll keep 4 decimal places, giving us 0.0234. That is, I have a standard error of about 2.34%. Final step is to go ahead and find my interval. To find my interval, I take p hat, which is 0.55. This is once again my point estimate. It's the single value I think represents my population well. I know, however, it's not going to be exactly 55% of all people who feel this way. So I take my single value, my point estimate, and I put plus or minus my margin of error. My margin of error is my z-score times SE. That is how many standard deviations I need to go out times my standard deviation estimate. In this case, that'll be 1.96 times 0.0234. I'll go ahead and subtract first, and when I subtract those 2 off, I believe I get 0.5041, keeping those 4 decimal places, and adding it 0.5959. I'll put parentheses around this to go ahead and put an interval notation. What this tells me is, according to my confidence interval, I am 95% confident that the true proportion of all American adults who feel that religion can answer all or most of today's problems is somewhere between 50.41% and 59.59%.